In a bustling downtown restaurant known for its eclectic menu and vibrant atmosphere, a news story was about to unfold that would leave everyone in disbelief. It was a usual busy day, with waiters weaving through tables and the clatter of dishes filling the air. The chef, a man named Carl, was known in the culinary world for his exceptional skills and unique recipes. However, his reputation was also marred by a stubborn streak and an unfortunate predisposition for making snap judgments about others. On this particular day, the restaurant buzzed with an unusual excitement. Word had spread that a very special guest was expected to dine there, none other than former President Barack Obama. The staff was thrilled at the opportunity to serve such a distinguished visitor, and preparations were underway to ensure everything was perfect. However, the atmosphere in the kitchen was starkly different. Carl had overheard the news and was visibly upset. Despite the honor most would feel in serving a former president, Carl allowed his personal biases to cloud his judgment. He grumbled about not wanting to cook for Obama, making his feelings clear to anyone within earshot. His words were not only unprofessional, but also filled with unwarranted disdain. The tension in the kitchen rose as the staff became increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. As the time neared for Obama's arrival, the restaurant manager, Lisa, approached Carl. She tried to reason with him, emphasizing the importance of professionalism and the restaurant's reputation. Carl, however, was unmoved. He flatly refused to cook for Obama, claiming it was a matter of personal principle. Lisa was left in a difficult position, knowing that refusing service to a guest, especially someone of Obama's stature, could have serious repercussions for the restaurant. The former president arrived, greeted warmly by the staff and patrons alike. He was seated at a prime table, and the atmosphere was abuzz with excitement. Obama's gracious demeanor and friendly interaction with the staff only highlighted the contrast with Carl's unreasonable behavior. As orders were taken and the kitchen buzzed with activity, Lisa made a decision that would set the stage for an unexpected turn of events. She stepped into the kitchen, her expression serious and determined. With a firm tone, she announced that if Carl was unwilling to fulfill his duties, she would take over the kitchen herself. Despite her limited cooking experience, her commitment to her guests and staff was paramount. Lisa's hands were steady as she donned an apron and began preparing the meal with the help of her sous chefs, who were more than willing to assist. The kitchen team rallied around her, driven by a shared sense of duty and respect for the guest of honor. As the dishes were being prepared, the air was filled with a mix of apprehension and hope. Meanwhile, in the dining area, Obama remained unaware of the drama unfolding in the kitchen. He continued to engage with his companions and other guests, his presence bringing a light and joy to the surroundings. The staff served him with utmost respect and professionalism, reflecting the true spirit of hospitality that Carl had momentarily forgotten. The moment of truth arrived when the dishes were served to Obama. All eyes were on him as he took the first bite. The tension in the air was palpable, with Lisa nervously watching from a distance. To her relief and the staff's delight, Obama's face lit up with approval. He complimented the meal, praising the flavors and the presentation, oblivious to the fact that it was not Carl who had prepared it. As the evening progressed, the restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the events of that day had changed something fundamental. The staff felt a renewed sense of unity and pride, while Lisa's leadership and courage were praised by all. As for Carl, the repercussions of his actions were yet to be fully realized, setting the stage for an even more dramatic unfolding the very next day. As the evening wore on, the restaurant staff buzzed with a mix of anxiety and excitement. Carl, the head chef known for his culinary prowess, stood stubbornly by his decision not to cook for Barack Obama. His stance wasn't just a personal protest. It was a statement that rippled through the kitchen, unsettling some and silently supported by others who shared his views, though they dared not voice them aloud. Lisa, the manager, faced a dilemma that tested her leadership. She knew the refusal could not only tarnish the restaurant's esteemed reputation, but also turn a celebratory evening into a public relations disaster. With a deep breath, She stepped into the kitchen, rolling up her sleeves. The staff watched as she washed her hands and took over Carl's station without hesitation. Her determination was palpable, and it inspired the sous chefs and other kitchen staff, who rallied around her, ready to assist in any way. Despite her limited experience in the culinary arts, Lisa followed the recipes with meticulous care, guided by the sous chefs who provided step-by-step instructions. The kitchen transformed into a hive of activity, everyone moving with purpose to ensure that the dishes were worthy of a former president's palate. The usual clatter of pots and pans was accompanied by quiet murmurs of encouragement as the team worked together seamlessly, united by a common goal. Out in the dining area, the atmosphere was light and jovial. Obama's presence brought a sense of honor and excitement to the guests and staff alike. He engaged in light conversation, his laughter and charismatic demeanor adding a warm glow to the evening. The other diners couldn't help but steal glances his way, feeling privileged to be in the same space as the former leader, admired worldwide for his eloquence and approachability. Back in the kitchen, Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she plated the final dish, her forehead dotted with perspiration from the heat of the stove and the pressure of the moment. The sous chef next to her gave a nod of approval, a small gesture that bolstered her confidence. With a deep breath, she wiped the edges of the plate clean, giving it one last inspection before giving the nod to serve. The waitstaff, aware of the unusual situation, carried the plates to Obama's table with a mix of pride and nervousness. They set the dishes down gracefully, stepping back to watch his reaction. The restaurant fell into a hushed anticipation, watching as Obama lifted his fork and took the first bite. His eyes closed briefly, a sign of culinary appreciation that every chef and restaurateur longs to see. The relief in the kitchen was palpable when the positive feedback reached them. Cheers and sighs of relief broke out among the staff, and even those who had initially agreed with Carl's decision couldn't help but feel a rush of pride for their collective achievement. Lisa's leadership had not only saved the evening, but had also shown that personal biases had no place in the hospitality industry. The true spirit of the restaurant shone through its ability to adapt and uphold its commitment to excellent service, regardless of the circumstances. As the night drew to a close, the restaurant staff gathered briefly in the kitchen, a sense of accomplishment filling the air. They had faced a significant challenge, and together they had risen above it, ensuring that their guests, especially one as notable as Obama, left with nothing but good memories of their dining experience. Meanwhile, Carl stood apart, his earlier resolve shaken by the evening's events, and the realization that his actions could have irreversible consequences for his career and the place he called his professional home. The next morning, the consequences of the previous night's events began to unfold in ways that none at the restaurant could have predicted. Word about Carl's refusal to cook for Barack Obama had leaked, and as the sun rose, the first signs of backlash started to emerge. The restaurant, usually bustling with preparations for the day, was quieter than usual, the atmosphere tinged with tension and uncertainty. Social media was ablaze with comments and shares as the story spread like wildfire. People expressed their disbelief and disappointment that a chef could let personal biases interfere with professional duties, especially in such a public and respected setting. The restaurant's online ratings began to dip, with calls for boycotts and critical reviews pouring in. Each ding of a new notification was a reminder of the growing storm outside. The staff gathered for an emergency meeting led by Lisa, who looked more determined than ever. She addressed the team, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. "We have always prided ourselves on our inclusivity and respect for all guests," she said. "What happened last night does not represent who we are or what we stand for." Her words rallied the staff, reminding them of the core values that had built the reputation of their beloved restaurant. Meanwhile, Carl, who had stayed away from the morning meeting, was feeling the isolation of his actions. He watched from a distance, his usual brash confidence replaced by a dawning realization of the repercussions. The phone rang continuously in the office, with media inquiries and canceled reservations. Each call was a sharp reminder of the impact of his decision. As the day progressed, the restaurant saw fewer patrons. Those who did come had heard of the incident and were curious to see how the staff was handling the situation. They were met with smiles and impeccable service, but the usual vibrant atmosphere was subdued. The staff worked even harder to prove that the actions of one individual did not define the whole team. In the midst of this, a local news crew arrived, cameras ready to capture the mood. They interviewed Lisa, who spoke eloquently about the importance of forgiveness and growth. "We are more than this incident," she emphasized, "and we are committed to learning from it and moving forward stronger than before." Her words were broadcasted that evening, painting the restaurant in a light of resilience and commitment to change. Carl watched the broadcast alone in the back of the kitchen, his expression unreadable. The public's response to Lisa's interview was overwhelmingly positive, with many applauding the restaurant's swift handling of the situation and their open commitment to improvement. Social media began to show signs of support, with patrons promising to return and give the restaurant another chance to prove itself. The story of that day served as a powerful lesson in responsibility and the impact of personal actions on a community. It was a turning point for everyone involved, a moment that would define the future of the restaurant and perhaps of Carl himself. As the evening drew to a close, the staff cleaned up with a sense of camaraderie, knowing they had weathered a significant storm together. They were not just a team but a family, ready to face whatever challenges came next with unity and grace. The new day dawned with a heavy air of anticipation as everyone at the restaurant wondered what the day would bring after the tumultuous events that had unfolded. The staff arrived early, their conversations a mix of apprehension and hope. They were determined to regain the trust and patronage of their guests, aware that the road ahead would be challenging but crucial for the restaurant's survival. As the doors opened, there was an unexpected guest who arrived before any others, Barack Obama himself, walking in with an air of calm and composure that immediately drew everyone's attention. The staff froze for a moment, surprised and unsure of the former president's intentions. However, his warm smile quickly put them at ease as he greeted them with the same charisma and respect he had shown during his previous visit. Obama's unexpected return was not for a meal but for a conversation, a chance to address the incident directly with the person who had refused to serve him. He asked to speak with Carl, who was already in the kitchen, trying to focus on his duties but distracted by the weight of recent events. With a nod from Lisa, Carl hesitantly stepped out to meet Obama. The conversation between Obama and Carl was private, with no other ears privy to the words exchanged. However, the impact of this meeting was visible in Carl's demeanor as he returned to the kitchen. His usual arrogance had diminished, replaced by a reflective and somewhat humbled expression. The staff could only speculate about the words that had passed between them, but it was clear that the discussion had a profound effect on Carl. Meanwhile, Obama spent some time with the staff, commending them for their professionalism and resilience in handling the situation. His words were encouraging, focusing on the importance of unity and forgiveness. He expressed his hope that the incident could serve as a learning opportunity, not just for Carl but for everyone at the restaurant. His visit, although brief, left a lasting impression, restoring a sense of pride and purpose among the team. The news of Obama's return and his gracious handling of the situation quickly spread beyond the walls of the restaurant. Patrons and onlookers who had heard about the previous day's events were touched by the gesture of reconciliation and the former president's efforts to personally address the issue. This act of forgiveness and understanding sparked a significant change in public perception. Social media, which had been filled with criticism just days before, now buzzed with praise and admiration for Obama's leadership and compassion. The restaurant began to receive support from the community, with people coming in not only to dine, but also to show their solidarity with the staff and their appreciation for the values Obama had highlighted during his visit. The atmosphere in the restaurant slowly transformed back to its former vibrancy, with guests engaging in lively conversations and enjoying their meals, reassured by the positive developments. As the day turned into evening, Carl remained mostly quiet, deeply affected by the day's events. The impact of Obama's words was evident, and the realization that he had almost jeopardized the future of the restaurant weighed heavily on him. He understood that his actions had consequences, not just for himself, but for everyone connected to the restaurant. That night, after the guests had left and the lights dimmed, the staff gathered for a brief meeting. There was a sense of renewed commitment in the air, a collective determination to move forward and uphold the values that Obama had so eloquently spoken of. The restaurant had faced its darkest hour, but with the support of a community that valued forgiveness and second chances, it was ready to embark on a path of redemption and growth. The next morning, the restaurant had a different energy. The tension that had weighed down the staff seemed lighter, though uncertainty still lingered in the air. Customers had started returning, some curious about the incident, others simply there to enjoy their meals. The restaurant was slowly recovering, but one question remained in everyone's mind. What would Carl do next? Carl arrived at work like he always did, but something about him was different. His usual confidence was missing. He moved with less certainty, his thoughts distant. The conversation with Obama from the day before still echoed in his mind. Obama hadn't scolded or shamed him. Instead, he had spoken with calmness, asking him to reflect on his actions and what they truly meant. He had talked about respect, about how cooking wasn't just about preparing food, but about bringing people together, about breaking barriers rather than building them. Carl had barely responded during the conversation, too stunned to say much. Now, standing in his familiar kitchen, he realized that the decision he made out of personal bias had not just hurt his career, but had also affected everyone around him. The restaurant staff, who had worked alongside him for years, had to step up to fix the mistake he had created. Lisa, despite not being a trained chef, had taken charge when he refused. His actions had not been a simple choice. They had caused real damage. Lisa entered the kitchen, watching Carl with an unreadable expression. She had been firm with him over the past few days, making it clear that what he did was unacceptable. But now, she saw something in him she hadn't seen before: remorse. "You have a lot to think about," she finally said. "But if you want to fix this, actions speak louder than words." Carl nodded. He didn't know where to begin, but he knew he had to start somewhere. He took a deep breath and walked to the center of the kitchen. The entire staff was watching him, waiting for what he would do next. Slowly, he removed his apron and placed it on the counter. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "I let my personal feelings get in the way of my job, and I hurt this restaurant, our restaurant. I let all of you down." A heavy silence filled the room. Some of the staff had been angry with Carl, some had been disappointed, and some had simply been confused by his actions. Now, hearing him admit his mistake was unexpected. "I want to fix this," Carl continued. "I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I want to earn back your trust." Lisa folded her arms, studying him. "Then prove it," she said simply. Carl nodded again. Without another word, he put his apron back on and walked toward the stove. He began cooking, not just as a chef, but as someone who understood the meaning of serving others. He didn't know if this would be enough, but it was a start. That night, Carl did something he had never done before. When the last customer left, he stayed behind and personally helped the staff clean up. It was a small act, but it was the first real sign that he was beginning to change. The following days were different for Carl. He was no longer the chef who walked into the kitchen with an air of superiority, giving orders without a second thought. Instead, he listened more, spoke less, and paid attention to the people around him. The change didn't happen overnight, and some staff members were still unsure whether to trust it. But little by little, they noticed that Carl was making an effort. He arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual, helping the junior chefs set up for the day. Instead of only focusing on his own dishes, he started checking on others, offering guidance without the usual sharpness in his tone. He didn't just bark instructions anymore. He explained, he taught, and most importantly, he thanked them for their hard work. Lisa watched from a distance, still cautious. She had worked with Carl for years and had never seen him like this. Could he really change? Was this just temporary guilt, or was it something deeper? She decided to keep observing before making any conclusions. The restaurant's reputation had taken a hit after the incident, but thanks to Obama's unexpected act of kindness and the staff's unwavering dedication, things were slowly improving. Customers were returning, and the warmth that had once defined the place was creeping back in. Yet there was still one big question left unanswered. How would Carl truly make amends? One afternoon, Carl approached Lisa's office, knocking lightly before stepping inside. She looked up from her desk, raising an eyebrow. "I want to do something," Carl said. "Something real. Not just words." Lisa leaned back in her chair. "Go on." Carl took a deep breath. "I want to invite a group of young chefs from underprivileged backgrounds to train here. Give them a chance to learn, to grow. No restrictions, no exclusions." Lisa blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected this. "That's a big step," she said carefully. Carl nodded. "I know, but I mean it. If I want to fix what I broke, I have to start by changing myself first." Lisa studied him for a long moment. Then finally she nodded. "All right, let's do it." The next week, the restaurant announced a new mentorship program, inviting young aspiring chefs from diverse backgrounds to come and learn from experienced professionals. It was a bold move, and it caught the attention of the media once again. Only this time, the headlines were different. Instead of criticism, people started praising the restaurant for its initiative, calling it a step toward real change. When the first group of trainees arrived, Carl personally welcomed them, shaking hands and introducing himself without the arrogance he once carried. He shared his knowledge freely, guiding them with patience and encouragement. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't expected. Pride, not in himself alone, but in the idea that he could do something meaningful. The restaurant, once shaken by controversy, now stood as a place of learning and second chances. And as Carl looked around at his students and his team, he realized that change wasn't just about fixing a mistake. It was about becoming someone better because of it. The mentorship program quickly became the heart of the restaurant. Every week, young aspiring chefs from different backgrounds arrived, eager to learn. Some had grown up dreaming of working in a kitchen, while others had never been given a real opportunity before. Carl, once the chef known for his arrogance, was now their teacher. And to everyone's surprise, including his own, he was good at it. At first, the trainees were intimidated by him. His reputation still lingered, and some had heard about the incident that nearly cost him his career. But as they spent time with him, they saw something different. He was patient, encouraging, and most importantly, willing to admit when he didn't have all the answers. When one of the trainees struggled with a technique, he didn't scold them or push them aside. He showed them, step by step, until they got it right. Lisa watched from the sidelines, taking in the transformation with quiet approval. She had been skeptical at first, unsure if Carl's change was real. But day by day, he proved that he wasn't just making a show of things. He was truly committed to being better. Word about the mentorship program spread beyond the restaurant. Customers who had once avoided the place were returning, eager to support a business that was trying to make a difference. Some even asked to meet the trainees, curious to hear their stories. For many of them, this wasn't just a chance to learn how to cook. It was a second chance at life. One evening, after the restaurant had closed, Carl sat in the kitchen with a few of his trainees. They had stayed late to practice, determined to perfect their dishes. As they cooked, they shared their stories, where they came from, the challenges they had faced, and what this opportunity meant to them. One trainee, a young woman named Maya, spoke softly as she plated a dish. "Before this, I never thought I'd have a real future in cooking," she admitted. "People always told me I wasn't good enough, that I wouldn't make it. But being here, It feels like I actually belong." Carl listened, something stirring inside him. He had spent so much of his life focused only on himself, his own skills, his own success. But hearing Maya's words, he realized that the true reward of being a chef wasn't just creating great food. It was lifting others up, giving them the same opportunities he had once taken for granted. That night, as he locked up the restaurant, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, not in himself alone, but in what the restaurant had become. It was no longer just a place for fine dining. It was a place of growth, learning, and second chances. And as he walked home, he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Months passed, and the restaurant had transformed into something much greater than anyone had expected. It was no longer just a place where people came for a meal. It had become a symbol of second chances, learning, and redemption. The mentorship program flourished, with young chefs from all walks of life training under Carl and his team. What once started as a way for Carl to make amends had now become his true passion. The customers noticed the change too. Regular guests who had dined there for years were amazed at the new energy in the restaurant. They saw young chefs confidently working in the kitchen, bringing fresh ideas to the menu. And they saw Carl, once known for his cold demeanor, now smiling as he worked alongside them. Lisa, ever watchful, knew that this transformation was not just about cooking. It was about people, about growth, and about proving that change was possible. One evening, as the restaurant buzzed with diners, a familiar face walked through the doors. Barack Obama. He had returned once again, this time without the weight of controversy hanging over the visit. The moment he stepped inside, the entire staff paused for just a second, a mixture of excitement and nervousness filling the air. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There was no tension, no unease, only a shared understanding that this was a full-circle moment. Lisa walked over to greet him, a proud smile on her face. "Welcome back," she said warmly. Obama looked around, taking in the changes. The energy, the diversity, the sense of purpose, it was all there. "I had a feeling I needed to come back," he said with a knowing smile. "And I'm glad I did." Carl, hearing the familiar voice, stepped out of the kitchen, his heart pounding. He wiped his hands on his apron and walked over. This time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. He extended his hand. "Welcome back, sir." Obama shook his hand firmly, his eyes filled with something that Carl hadn't seen before, respect. "I heard you've been busy," he said, glancing toward the kitchen where the trainees were hard at work. Carl nodded. "They taught me more than I taught them," he admitted, a small smile forming. "And I think I'd finally understand what you were trying to tell me that day." Obama chuckled. "Good, because it was never about me. It was about you." Dinner that evening was unlike any other. Carl personally oversaw the meal, but it wasn't just his cooking that stood out. It was the teamwork, the dedication of the trainees, and the way every dish told a story of growth and change. The entire staff worked together seamlessly, showing just how much the restaurant had evolved. As Obama finished his meal, he called over one of the young trainees. It was Maya, the young woman who had once doubted her place in the culinary world. He complimented her dish, and she beamed with pride. "Keep going," he told her. "You're going to do great things." As the night ended and the last guests left, the staff gathered one last time in the kitchen. There was no need for speeches. Everyone felt the weight of what had just happened. They had come full circle, not just as a restaurant, but as a team, as a family. Carl looked around at them, at Lisa, at the young chefs who had found a home here, and he realized something. Mistakes didn't define a person. What they did after those mistakes did. And as he stood there, surrounded by people who had once doubted him, he knew that he had finally earned their trust. The restaurant was no longer just a place to eat. It was a place of redemption, of new beginnings, and of endless possibilities. And for Carl, it was proof that change wasn't just possible, it was worth it.